Everything you use right now comes from them. Every letter you write, every book you read, every law you obey, every clock you use, every calendar you look at, all of it from the Sumerians. But what you know about the Sumerians is most likely wrong or incomplete. School textbooks introduce them as the first civilization and move on, as if they are merely a historical footnote. But the Sumerians are humanity's greatest turning point, and what I am about to tell you is not in any textbook. Who wrote the first words in history, and what did they write? When were the first laws created, and what did they say? Was the flood legend really written before Noah? How free were Sumerian women? And why did this magnificent civilization disappear? This is Dark Past Stories TV, the history they never told you. Around 4000 before the Common Era, the lands of present-day Iraq, between two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, a fertile plain stretched out. Mesopotamia, Greek for the land between two rivers. People were already living on these lands, but between 4000 and 3500 before the Common Era, something changed. Villages grew. They transformed into cities. Eridu, Uruk, Ur, Lagash, Nippur. These were not merely large villages, they were cities in the true sense. Specialized professions, trade networks, religious centers, governing structures. Uruk was the largest. Around 3000 before the Common Era, its population was between 50,000 and 80,000. At that time, it was the largest city in the world. But where did the Sumerians come from? This is still debated. Their language is not related to Akkadian, Elamite, or any other known language. It is a completely isolated tongue. This is why some historians argue the Sumerians migrated from outside. Some say they came from the Iranian plateau. Some say Central Asia. But there is no definitive answer. The Sumerians appeared as if from nowhere, and when they appeared, they changed the world. Around 3200 before the Common Era, the city of Uruk. A scribe pressed wedge-shaped marks into a clay tablet, and these marks became the earliest known writing in history. But there is a very important detail here. The first writing was not poetry, not philosophy, not a prayer to the gods. It was a record of beer and barley. 18 measures of barley, 37 months, Kushim. The name of history's first known author was probably Kushim, and what he wrote was an accounting ledger, a warehouse inventory. This is both amusing and profoundly meaningful, because writing was not invented for great ideas. It was invented for practical needs. Tax tracking, trade records, debt registers. Over time, this system evolved. Cuneiform writing was born. Thousands of signs. It could express both sounds and concepts and numbers. And here is a fascinating detail. The Sumerians used mathematics not in base 10, but in base 60. Why 60? Still not fully known. But the remnants of this system are still in our lives today. 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute, 360 degrees in a circle, 6 times 60. Sumerian mathematics has been living inside your clocks for 4,000 years. The laws of Ur-Nammu. Around 2100 before the Common Era, the oldest known written legal text in history, 300 years before Hammurabi, and their contents both surprise us and feel familiar today. Unlike Hammurabi's an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth approach, the Ur-Nammu laws adopted a far more modern philosophy, financial penalty. If you break someone's arm, you pay silver. If you cut off their nose, you pay silver. If you break their foot, you pay silver. Not physical punishment, compensation. But there are even more interesting provisions. A slave could marry a free woman. Children born from such a union were considered free. False accusation was prohibited. If you accused someone and could not prove it, the punishment fell on you. A judge who accepted a bribe was removed from office and could never serve as a judge again. Widows and orphans were under special protection. Reading these laws written 4,000 years ago, one stops and thinks, are these really that ancient? When we think of women in the ancient world, restrictions always come to mind. But in Sumer, the picture was very different. Sumerian women could own property, they could conduct trade, they could testify in court, they could sign contracts in their own names. There was a right to divorce for both men and women. In the event of divorce, the woman received her dowry back. Women who worked in temples, the Naditu priestesses, held an extraordinarily powerful status. They had their own businesses. They conducted trade. They extended credit. Documents found in archives show these women were active business people. And history's first known signed author was a woman, Enheduanna. She lived around 2300 before the Common Era. She was the high priestess of the city of Ur. The hymns she wrote to the moon god Nana are still read today. And these hymns are the earliest known literary works attributed to a named author. So, humanity's first known author, the first writer whose name we know, was a Sumerian priestess. Why is this not in school textbooks? 1872, London, the British Museum. A young Assyrian scholar named George Smith was examining clay tablets brought from Nineveh. And when he read the text on one tablet, he could not believe his eyes. The tablet told the story of a great flood. The gods decided to destroy humanity. One man was warned. He built a massive ship. He loaded animals onto the ship. The flood came. It destroyed everything. The ship came to rest on a mountain. The man released a dove. This was the story of Noah. But it was not. This tablet dated to 1800 before the Common Era, hundreds of years before the Hebrew Bible was written. And the hero of the story was not Noah. It was Utnapishtim. This discovery shook the religious world. Had the flood story been taken from the Sumerians? Or did both stories come from a common source? The debate continues today, but one fact is clear. The flood legend began with the Sumerians. The oldest version of the flood story appears in Sumerian tablets dating to 2600 before the Common Era. The story of Utnapishtim was later incorporated into the Epic of Gilgamesh in Babylon, and from there it spread to other cultures. One of humanity's most famous stories began on a Sumerian clay tablet, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Around 2100 before the Common Era, the oldest known literary work in history, the first novel, the first epic, the first hero's journey, and its content is surprisingly modern. Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk, a powerful, handsome man who wanted to be immortal. When his closest friend Enkidu died, Gilgamesh was forced to confront death, and he set out in search of immortality. This story is not merely a legend. It contains existential questions: friendship, death, meaning, immortality, questions written 4,000 years ago that are still relevant today. In one passage of the epic, a tavern keeper woman says to Gilgamesh, "Gilgamesh, where are you wandering? The life you seek you will never find. When the gods created mankind, they kept life for themselves and gave death to mankind. You, Gilgamesh, fill your belly, make merry day and night, celebrate every day, dance and play day and night. Wear clean clothes, wash your head, bathe yourself. Look at the one who holds your hand, enjoy your wife who embraces you." These lines written 4,000 years ago could appear in a philosophy of life book today. The Sumerians produced not only writing and law, they also produced science and technology. The wheel, invented around 3,500 before the Common Era. Its first purpose was not transportation, it was the potter's wheel. Use in transportation came later. Agricultural irrigation. They opened canals from the Euphrates and Tigris to water farmland. Without this system, they could not have farmed in the dry climate of Mesopotamia. Beer. The Sumerians were history's first known brewers. And beer at that time was not just a drink. It was used like money. Workers were paid wages in beer. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Enkidu's civilization is symbolized by beer. Astronomy. They systematically observed planets and stars. They created a lunar calendar. They could predict solar and lunar eclipses. Medicine. Sumerian medical tablets are the earliest known medical documents. They contain more than 250 herbal medicine recipes. Surgical procedures are described. And one fascinating detail, both natural and supernatural causes of disease were recognized. So both a doctor and a priest would treat illness. Around 2000 before the Common Era, Sumerian civilization entered its decline. But this collapse cannot be attributed to a single cause. First, climate change. Around 2200 before the Common Era, a major drought began across the Middle East. Researchers call this the 4.2 kiloyear event. This drought did not only shake Sumer, it shook all Middle Eastern civilizations. Egypt also experienced collapse during the same period. Second, soil salinization. Centuries of irrigation caused the soil to become increasingly salty. Fertile lands gradually turned barren. Grain production fell. Third, external attacks. The Gutians, Amorites, Elamites, various peoples attacked Sumerian cities. Particularly when the Akkadian Empire collapsed around 2154 before the Common Era, the chaos that followed struck the Sumerian cities as well. Fourth, the rise of the Akkadians. The Semitic Akkadians grew increasingly powerful. King Sargon unified all of Mesopotamia around 2334 before the Common Era. The Sumerian language gradually gave way to Akkadian in administration. But the Sumerian language did not disappear entirely. Just as Latin is used in science today, Sumerian continued to be used in religious and scholarly texts for centuries. Sumerian civilization came to an end around 2000 before the Common Era, but its legacy never ended. The Babylonians took the writing. Hammurabi developed the laws. The flood legends spread throughout all Middle Eastern mythology. Astronomical knowledge reached Greek scholars. Base 60 mathematics still lives in our clocks today. And perhaps the least known legacy of all, Sumerian schools. Yes, history's first schools were in Sumer. They were called Eduba. From morning to evening, writing, mathematics, and music were taught. Tablets written by students are displayed in museums today. On one of those tablets, a student wrote, "My teacher beat me. My mother comforted me." Reading this sentence, written by a child 4,000 years ago, one smiles, because that feeling has never changed. The Sumerians gave us writing, they gave us law, they gave us mathematics, they gave us literature, they gave us school, and perhaps most importantly, they showed us that being human has never changed. This is Dark Past Stories TV, the history they never told you.